laughed. I'm really excited. So thank you for joining us for today's Tuesday at 2. Whether you are just beginning to prepare yourself to homeschool or are looking to better your homeschool experience, we are going to have some tips for you. And I'm Antoinette and LaGrossa. I have 5 children and have been homeschooling for 18 years. I cannot believe it. I joined the ShillerLearning team about 15 years ago and have enjoyed helping thousands of homeschool families find solutions that are often life-changing. So I'm really excited to have Robbie Gleason of Purposeful Homeschool here with us today. Robbie, welcome. And if you could tell us a bit about yourself, your homeschool journey, and how you've been helping homeschoolers with Purposeful Homeschool.
Okay. My name is Robbie Gleason. I have 3 children. One has graduated from my homeschool. I have one that is a junior this year and is still homeschooled. And then I have one that's in 3rd grade. He is 9. And I've been homeschooling. This is my 6th year homeschooling. My older 2 were in private school until 5th and 8th grade. So I've experienced both sides of the education spectrum, you know, the schooling and out in a brick and mortar, plus the homeschooling. I've also been a part of a charter school, and I've also homeschooled on my own. So I have experience in all 3
You've
of
done
them.
it all.
Yeah. I feel like I've tried about every curriculum out there too. So
right.
But yeah, so that's me. I'm married and have been married for 25 years. So.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Anything else? I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into the first tip to help parents who are on this journey. So I'm going to let you go with this one, Robbie.
Okay. Well, this was one of the hardest things, I think, that hardest realizations I had to come to in the beginning, because I was the parent that said I would never homeschool. I didn't understand how and why people would do such a thing until I was faced with the decision of having to pull my kids out of private school because of a job loss. So we were not in the same state that we are now. So the state we were in, it didn't have a great public school system. So this was sort of my only choice in my mind at that point. And so I think because we go for what we're used to, you know, and so everything is really rigid. Everything is, you know, every problem has to be completed and every aspect of the curriculum, you know, every lesson has to be covered exactly the way it's laid out. And what I found was that we were all kind of burning out pretty quickly. It wasn't
because
fun.
You were going for that, replicating that public school at home.
Right. And really, truly, I mean, teachers have a lot of liberty to expand on a lesson or tone it down or whatever if they need to. But because they're working with a whole classroom of kids, they can't tailor it to the individual needs of each student, where as homeschoolers, we can do that. So if your child gets a concept after, you know, a very short amount of time, there's no need to just drill it and kill it, you know, at that point. If your child expresses interest in something that you've learned about and wants to go on a rabbit trail, there's no reason why you can't do that, you know, instead of saying, no, we're not going to talk about that right now, you know.
Right. Or our time for this subject is up. We need to move on.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So, you know, you could schedule everything so rigidly to the point that they'll just burn out, you know, and likely you will too, you know. So the flexibility of the homeschool environment and being able to do fun things that you wouldn't necessarily get to do in a classroom, you know, learning through play, learning through games, learning through you know, books and rich literature. You know, those are all things that you can do as a homeschooler that might not. Go ahead.
And that's one of the things that I would caution people too when considering homeschool curriculum, is to be aware of that when they're searching, because there are a lot of programs, you know, certainly there's a lot that don't, but there are a number of homeschool curricula that model after that doing school at home model.
True. Very true. Some of them are actually written for a classroom environment, and then they've just,
that's true.
Right, even if it's a Christian curriculum, you know, it may be written for a classroom environment, and then they realized there was a market for, you know, a homeschool, a market for the curriculum, but it hasn't really been tweaked for the homeschooler. So parents sometimes think that they have to do every single thing that's written in there, when really a lot of it is just giving the teacher ideas on things they can do, and they pick and choose from those things. And you know, again, you end up with some burnout there. So,
and that absolutely leads into your second tip, which is that being flexible.
Right, being flexible. When we started homeschooling, I had a toddler. So trying to work with my older kids while I had a toddler was challenging. And so I finally realized that I needed to be more flexible in that, you know, I could work with the older kids while he was still sleeping, and I could, you know, do some things during nap time. I could, you know, make sure that they're doing independent work when I'm giving one-on-one attention to the younger one. And, you know, there's just some things that I learned through that process that made me realize I just need to be flexible. And sometimes we're like, we're going to start at this time and we're going to finish at this time. And, you know, if you're not finished, then, you know, you can't do anything until you get finished. And, you know, I mean, it gets really rigid and really, again.
And one of the things I found with that wonderful flexibility of homeschooling is that you can do a lot in the evening and on weekends also. So you don't have to be held to those traditional school hours. So
yes,
you can work, be it a part-time or full-time job, into homeschooling. So you don't have to feel like homeschooling has to lead you to being a one-income family. I mean, certainly that is the majority of homeschoolers do tend to be one-income families, but with the flexibility of homeschooling, you can work that in, and it doesn't have to be your traditional 180-day school calendar. You can school during the summer so that you can spread that out and give yourself more flexibility during the school year.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when we started the homeschool journey, it was due to a job loss. So he took a job that paid quite a bit less, you know, than what he was used to. So I ended up having to go back to work as well. And I worked a 1 to 11 shift. So in the mornings, I would help my kids do whatever they needed help with. I would give them assignments. I would give them study sheets. They were required to they were old enough to be there on their own, because the oldest was 8th grade. So, I mean, they could be there without an adult there. So they were required to do their work while I was gone. And then when I'd get home at night at 11 o'clock, I would, you know, come in, I would go over their work. We would, you know, talk about what changes needed to be made, if they needed to retake a test or whatever it was. And then I would prepare for the next school day. And that's how our schedule worked. And it was definitely not traditional, right? So even now, we don't have a traditional schedule. I've got, we started the school year, and my teenager just didn't matter what time he went to bed, just couldn't get up in the morning, and we were just button heads so bad. So finally he said, hey, you know, I've got a friend who does most of his schoolwork at night, and then he sleeps in and then finishes up, you know, the next day. So like he gets a head start on his stuff in the evening, and then finishes it up after he wakes up and he gets to sleep in. And I'm like, do you want to try that? And he said, yeah, and it has been working out great. And so again,
that's great.
Not a traditional schedule, but it works. So.
Well, and it's interesting because numerous studies have shown that teens who have a later start to the school day actually perform better across many areas. So that absolutely fits in with, what science is telling us. And unfortunately, with the bureaucracy of school, it doesn't fit most school environments.
Right. It's true.
And then the third tip is that incorporate the interest-led learning. This is one that I absolutely love because it makes everyone happy.
It does. I mean, I need a spine. I don't just wing it. And some people can, I'm not a traditional like unschooler in my philosophy, but we do go on a lot of rabbit trails. And when he expresses interest in something, I'm thinking mostly of my younger one. If he expresses interest in something and we take the time to explore that, I mean, he retains it so much better. He's excited about the learning of it. And I've noticed that sometimes that window can be really short. And I know, I think I shared this with you, Antoinette, about how he had expressed interest in a specific topic. He wanted to know how the president got elected. And so I knew I had a book on it. And I've got a pretty vast home library for that reason, so that we can kind of dive in. But I couldn't find the book. So a couple of days later, I finally found the book, and I was so excited. I'm like, hey, you remember when we were, when you wanted to learn about this, I found the book I was looking for. And he just looks at me. He's like, yeah, that's nice. I mean, he was just over it at that point. So if I had kind of forced the issue, I don't know if he would have remembered anything we had learned. It might have sparked interest again, but there's no way to know for sure. So,
Right.
just having, again, that's sort of the being flexible, being willing to kind of deviate off of the plan, and explore some of the interest-led, things, and exposing our kids to lots of different things helps to us to see where their interests lie. Like, he's very into electronics and circuits and stuff like that. So we usually do, I have several circuit kits and things that we play with, that he plays with, because it's something that's interesting to him. And it's really taught him a lot, in the process, about how they work. So
Yeah, and that interest-led learning, that dovetails very nicely with the Montessori philosophy, in
Right.
that child-led, following your child's interest, because they do then absorb it like a sponge, as opposed to having it bounce right off of them as you're trying to, aim all of this great knowledge at them, but they're not receiving it. I mean,
Right.
certainly there is a time for that structured, okay, we're moving on to this next level and introducing things. But, along with that, following that interest, it just makes a world of difference. And you can take a child who's having a really frustrating, not great school experience, and you switch to that interest-led learning, and now they're a willing participant and partner in their education, and ultimately they're going to take ownership of that.
Right. And sometimes there are obviously things that they have to learn. And if they're getting frustrated on something, that's also a great way to just take a little bit of a break. Just say, okay, well, let's take a little break. What do you want to learn about right now? And then that takes all of that frustration, and they get excited, because then all of a sudden they have a little bit of control, a little bit of choice in the matter. And it gives the brain the time to form the connections, because sometimes I think we push kids to the point where beyond that frustration level, and that beyond
Oh, yeah.
that line. And so if we give their brains time to form those connections and come back to it, I've experienced this numerous times, and where all of a sudden they've got it, and we didn't even have to go over it again. Like, they just got
I don't know if you remember, in one of the tips in the ShillerLearning parent guide is exactly that. Avoid allowing your child's boredom or frustration to build. Once you see that happening, put it aside, make note to come back to it another time, because once that happens, it's counterproductive. You're not going to have a good time. They're not going to. And chances are you're going to teach them not what you're trying to, but you're going to teach them to not like the subject matter.
right.
Um,
That's
so
probably where the epiphany came from, honestly, because it's we've definitely had it happen in math, and I know that's one of the philosophies there with the Montessori and with Schiller. So
Oh,
I've
yeah.
been
So,
utilizing that with other subjects too.
yeah. By the way, how did you come to start using Schiller Math?
I came to start using Schiller because we were getting frustrated with another curriculum that we were using, and he was getting bored with it because it was a mastery-based program, and so it would stay on topics too long, and then it really focused heavily on memorizing math facts, and he was really struggling with that. And I had realized at that point that he was extremely visual learner. He was a very visual learner, and memorizing math facts, black and white, stick figures on a white background wasn't helping him. Like, he couldn't do it. Like, really, he couldn't do it. And all the tricks, repeating them over and over and over and over, and this and that wasn't working. Because he's not an auditory learner. In fact, he had some auditory processing delays at that point. So a friend of mine had told me about Schiller and gave me her book to look at. And so I was looking at it, and the philosophy was not to memorize math facts, but to memorize them through usage, that they would memorize them. And so that sold me right there. And then, of course, when I first started using it, it was like, this is fun. I mean, literally math became fun for him. This is really fun. And to this day, it's still considered fun math. And
that's part of the next tip, the 4-day schedule with the Friday Fun School, which I love this idea.
And what's so funny about this is that he sort of came up with it. Okay, so again, my youngest. So we implemented a 4-day schedule because at one point we were with a charter school that had an all-day options program. So that one day they would go for the whole day for like PE and gym and art and STEM and that sort of thing. So we had to have a 4-day school week. And so we now homeschool independently, and he started over time, because a lot of our field trips were on Fridays, he started calling Fridays Friday Fun School. And then after we started homeschooling on our own, he started, if we didn't have a field trip schedule, he goes, but this is Friday Fun School, and what can we do that's fun? And so I said, well, actually, let's try something. I said, we have to cover every subject, but you get to pick what we get to do for every subject. So Mad Libs for grammar, a learning game, a challenging logic game for thinking skills.
For grammar, have you ever played GoToPress?
No,
Oh, check it out. I think you will love GoToPress. It's a really fun way of practicing grammar skills.
That's awesome. Because I'd love more tips, because that's the only one I've got for grammar. Is that. And sometimes just taking a concept that normally wouldn't be fun and making it fun. Like if I write a paragraph that has goofy misspellings and grammar mistakes, then he gets to correct my mistakes, that sort of thing. That's fun too.
Mm-hmm.
But for math, it was funny to me that because we have some supplemental math things that we have online if I happen to need him to work independently, which is what I've got him doing right now. But it's not his favorite. He wants the engagement. So for math, he always picks Schiller because that is the most fun for him and it's effective. So, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So for what are some of the other subjects? Oh, I've got a couple of spelling kind of games that we can play for spelling, and so he gets to pick.
One of our favorite games for spelling, it's I think it's called 4-way spell down or spell down. It's you move wooden letters around, you're rolling dice. So it's a hands-on spelling game, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you work everything else into your 4-day schedule. So do you do anything different, or just, over time, it's all going to even out?
Over time, it's all going to even out. I really don't do anything special. At one point, we were using Bookshark, which has a 4-day schedule already. So that was kind of nice that it was all scheduled out that way, but we don't really stick to the schedule. I'm think more in terms of goals and objectives and things that I want to make sure that they have covered. And that approach gives me a lot of flexibility, and it's worked out really well. I mean, he tests like 3 years above, reading level. He tests probably 2 years above in math. And so it's just worked out. So,
and that's great. And that's one of the questions we often get about ShillerLearning, with it being that Montessori, very multisensory hands-on math. People are concerned, well, how are they going to do on tests? And your experience is what we find, customers anecdotally share with us, is that their kids test very well.
Yeah, he can do math in his head that I can't do. I mean, in my head, not that I can't do on paper, but I mean, I can do it on paper, but I can't do it in my head. So the conceptual understanding of math makes him test really well, because he might not know exactly, because of the way they introduce the concepts and the order. He gets questions correct that are above his grade level because he understands it conceptually, and he can logically deduce, even if he doesn't technically know how to do that particular problem. So yeah, he's always tested really well.
And that's one of the benefits of that multisensory learning, is that it really does help them to see and understand things in a way they wouldn't otherwise. And so that's actually our 5th tip today, is to incorporate multisensory learning into your homeschooling. And that's going to be making sure that topics are approached visually, tactile, auditory, and kinesthetic. They see it, they touch it, they hear it, whether that's through, fun learning songs, poems, chants, or other auditory activities. And then kinesthetic, that is such a biggie, and a lot of programs will lump that kinesthetic and tactile together, but those are actually different. They can often be, an activity can be both, but unless you are engaging the major muscle groups, the lesson is not kinesthetic. To be kinesthetic, you need to engage those major muscle groups: jumping, clapping, getting up, moving around, walking the perimeter of a room when you're learning about perimeter, things like that.
Right.
I'm
so sorry. I just noticed that my son does that automatically. Like when we're working on, say, memorization of something, he paces. And when I'm quizzing him on something, he wants to walk around, and it helps him think. And this program incorporates all of that. And I've noticed that the way they incorporate the auditory learning, even though like read alouds have always been a struggle for us, because he won't remember what I've read to him. It just kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And so that's part of that auditory processing that he's dealt with. But by putting it in a song, in a chant, in a rhyme, whatever, he does remember those. And this has helped his auditory processing, so that now he can sit through a read aloud. He has to really focus, but he knows now, like that has improved tremendously over time, just because we're not avoiding auditory, you know what I mean? We're not avoiding auditory learning, but we're not making it the main way he learns.
And by including it in with those other learning styles, he's making the connection with those other learning styles, which is helping to support his development of those auditory processing skills.
Absolutely, yes, exactly. And I've seen a big improvement since we've been doing that.
And then our 6th tip for today is, don't do it all by yourself. When I first started homeschooling, I thought I was going to write all of my own curriculum, and I did do that for a little bit and planned out the day and created everything. It took a lot of time. There's a lot of great resources out there. We really are homeschooling at an incredible time. So no matter what your child's learning style, no matter what your preferred teaching method, there's going to be something for you. And like Robbie said, be flexible with it. Don't be held prisoner to your curriculum. Utilize it in a way that works for you. Use it as a framework, a structure, a spine. But it gives you a great starting point for you to launch off from. So don't try to do it all by yourself. Our 7th tip is to lead, but do not spoon feed your child. This is something that Larry Schiller is really big on. Robbie, I mentioned to you how there have been some activities that parents would like to see, fleshed out a little bit more. And Larry has come back and said, no, that if we did what they're asking, that's spoon feeding the child. We want kids to learn how to think and make those deductions and develop those critical thinking skills that are crucial when you get into higher math. And so if a child has been using did I just lose the presentation, or are we still?
I can see it.
Okay, so it just disappeared on my screen. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So as long as you can still see it, that's great. So utilize it, doing that critical thinking so that, it better prepares them for that higher level learning. And so sometimes when kids have been using a program or been in school where they've really been spoon-fed and haven't had to do that critical thinking and make those connections on their own, sometimes they can be a little uncomfortable with that in the beginning. But in generally a couple of weeks, once they get used to that approach and they start having those epiphanies where they've made those connections on their own, it really gives them a rush and a sense of satisfaction that you do not get if you're using a program where they're being spoon-fed. So you want to lead, and that's in Montessori. The classroom teachers are not called teachers, they're directors, because they're simply directing the child in advancement of their development. And so that's something we want to model in our homeschooling is, we're giving them the materials and the structure, but they are the ones that are doing the discovering.
Absolutely. I could give examples if you want.
Oh, sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I told you that my older two were in private school until 5th and 8th grade, and both of them struggled so badly with critical thinking when I started homeschooling them. They just wanted to know what they needed to do, how to do it, and what they needed to memorize, and they just wanted to get a good grade on the test. And that's what school is traditionally, set up to be like. And so just trying to get them to logically deduce something was really, really frustrating. And I'm still undoing this. I don't want to say damage, but in a way I feel like it is in a way. I'm still undoing this with my oldest one, and we're doing some critical thinking courses for that very reason. Like, I need him to think, I need him to know how to think and learn to think. And so that's what I really appreciate about Schiller. And I incorporate critical thinking in other aspects of the curriculum too. And with the fractions, I noticed that he was starting to get frustrated because it doesn't explain what he's supposed to do. It gives him, 18 boxes, and he needs to color in 1/18. Well, that's easy, right? And then the next box, he's got 18 boxes. He has to color in 1/9. Well, there's 18 boxes. How do you do that? And I mean, I'm just sitting there trying to talk him through the thinking process, but not tell him, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so he was getting so frustrated. And when he finally got it, he was so excited. And then he's like, this is fun. And he starts doing all of them because he finally got it. And that was, this is fun, and
Yeah.
anyway,
And
he was just proud of himself. Yeah.
those epiphanies will make him enjoy that, journey of learning and stumbling through and working through things that he finds challenging.
Right.
And that's going to help our kids become the problem solvers and entrepreneurs of tomorrow, which is really important because statistically, as homeschoolers, our kids are more likely to be entrepreneurs than the population at large. We have just a couple more minutes. I want to finish up with our last tip, which is connecting with your homeschool community. And, as in other areas of life, community in homeschooling is very important. So there are meetup groups, Yahoo groups. Yes, they still exist. Facebook groups, plus local co-op and support groups. So find out what's available. You've got those online communities, but make sure you make local connections as well, because being able to get together with some generally moms, but sometimes dads also, who have that shared experience that you're going through, and so you can get together over coffee and share your joys, your triumphs, and commiserate also, because while homeschooling is a great experience, there will be things occasionally that you feel like you want to commiserate about. Also, go to a homeschool convention, and most of the organizations that host the conventions can also help put you in touch with your local homeschool community and groups in your area. And those organizations also, many of them host very vibrant Facebook groups, and many of them are organized by state. And so when you have questions about homeschool law in your state, that's a great resource, is your state organization. And going to that homeschool event in your area, you will also meet homeschoolers who are from your area. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen friendships begin in the ShillerLearning booth, and that's been really neat to see. But homeschool conventions, they're one of the best kept secrets in homeschooling. The resources that are available to you, on site at the convention, as well as through the organizations that host them, you're going to be pleasantly surprised with everything that's available to you. So if anyone had any questions, we do have just a couple of minutes left if anyone had any questions. If not, Robbie, thank you so much for joining us today. This was great. I really enjoyed it. You are a wealth of knowledge about homeschooling as well as health topics. I always enjoy talking to you. And you make great video reviews, by the way. We didn't mention that. Robbie has a YouTube channel. Robbie, tell us a bit about the content that you have on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel called Purposeful Homeschool, and it is mostly curriculum review. So if you have, there's an extensive one on Schiller too, if you're one of those that is considering that. And I've got timestamps notated for different aspects of it. But the curriculum review is the main thrust of it. Although I plan to expand it to do other, more helpful and informational kind of topics. But yeah, there's lots of curriculum reviews on there because I've tried a lot. So
that's great. I know you have that as well as the blog posts. I know you do more of the video now than of the written blog, but I think both of those are great resources for homeschoolers, especially if you're just getting into homeschooling and trying to figure this journey out.